we don't get any Zoom bombs. She's also going to take questions and stuff and kind of keep us going and on time. And here we go. I'm going to talk about, I wanted to talk about SIP's event. We are having our first online wine tasting coming up on May 15th. And I wanted to let everybody know, please go to our website. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today, but I did want to get my little plug in. It's going to be a very fun event. We're going to talk about wine. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. And we'll have a list. Once you register, we'll have a list of the wines that you can taste with our wine expert. And we'll talk about pairing cheeses and what kind of foods and where they come. It's called A Taste of the West Coast. So we're very excited about that. And I'm, without further ado, going to introduce Juanita Graham.
Let's see. Okay, yes. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I had everything cut on. Hello, everyone. I am so glad you are joining us. I am going to jump right in because for the topic that we have today, I would say that you're getting like half of the quarter of the tip of the iceberg because books have been written on rape culture. There's whole courses in college on it. So you're going to get about 30 minutes of a quick snippet, but I hope it will encourage you to go out and learn more and share more with people about it. I am going to kind of go through the presentation. Please feel free to type in the chat if you have questions. And we will take the questions at the end because we want to be able to have the opportunity to kind of get the full picture of the presentation. And if you can, please stay on to the end because we do have a couple of polling questions at the end. We want to evaluate how things are and what you think about what we're presenting so we can always take that information and make it better. So without further ado, I'm going to hopefully get my screen to share. And can everybody see that? Yes, okay. So I am Juanita. I'm the Director of Outreach Services at Avalon, and part of what I do is education. And that is part of the vision and the mission for Avalon. We want an aware community. So that's why we are doing these town halls to help make the community aware. And we want to educate people. So that's the whole mission for this setting anyway. And so before we get started, I want to make sure to let people know the trigger warning. This presentation does include information and discussions that could potentially be triggering for people because it does talk about sexual assault and in part domestic violence and sexual violence. So I wanted to make sure everybody had that awareness, and I wanted to encourage you up front to please take care of yourself and have your well-being first and foremost. So if you need to step out in order to kind of take care of yourself, please do that. And I want to start off with a couple of special notes so I don't have to keep making reference to it throughout the workshop. While most research and data about rape culture addresses how it is directed toward and impacts women, we understand that women are not the only people impacted. It has been devised based on women, but we know that it reaches a broader spectrum of people. We also understand that when different aspects of a person's social identity gets intersected, it can increase the level of the impact for that person. So if your socioeconomic status and your gender and your race all coincide together, it can exponentially increase that impact that you may be having because each one of those pieces has their own impact, and then you combine them and it increases it even more. So having that awareness is important too as we jump right on in. So rape culture, what is it? And it is pretty much an environment that tolerates behavior that minimizes and trivializes or even normalizes sexual assault behaviors and abusive attitudes. It's kind of a systemic kind of thing that is allowing such things to happen. And if you take a look at the graphic, as we talk about what comprises and perpetuates it, you're going to see some of these things on the pyramid later on. But the point at the bottom is the piece I want you to hone in on. None of these things are isolated. So it's not just an isolated joke that does it. It all kind of builds on each other. So these attitudes and the actions at the bottom help to reinforce anything that might be above it. So it creates a systemic issue. So you can't pull out just one and say, well, this thing won't matter because this thing connects to this thing, connects to this thing. And then it makes it all a part of the process that gets us to the point of a culture. So that's why we said we need to have this conversation. That's the conversation we need to have. And as I mentioned, that it's systemic. And if you look at it from a social ecological perspective, which is just a big term to talk about, that it intersects with where we all live, you have an individual that is in a relationship, and that relationship, you live in a community, and that community is in the greater society. So each piece is connected to the other piece. And so where we allow it in one space, it ultimately ends up being allowed in the other places. So that's the piece to keep focused on, is that it is a cultural systemic thing that we're working with. So what is it not? Because sometimes people are like, well, you're just bashing. It is not bashing men. It is not saying that all men are rapists and that all men are capable of rape. Absolutely not saying that at all. You'll find as we're talking about it, it's saying that culturally we are allowing some things to take place or being allowed to be said, not that just one group of people are saying it or doing it. It's the whole culture. And it's not a claim that women or men are incapable of lying about sexual assault. Although I will point out, and the statistic for it is in here later, that false reports tend to get in the media, so they get a lot of attention, but false reporting for sexual assaults actually are very low. It's like in between 2 and 8%, and it's no higher than any other false reporting for any other crime. And then on top of that, you add the fact that most sexual assaults aren't reported. So there is definitely a lot more that's happening than we even know about. So the false ones just get attention. So that's why they seem to stick out for people more. So we have this whole cultural thing happening, and people are kind of set up in this position where we're seeing things normalized and trivialized, dealing with sexual violence. And that gets perpetrated through all those things on that triangle. And so I love images because they stick in people's minds. So hopefully it can help you to remember. Um, Traditionally, they've broken it down into misogynistic language, objectification of women's body, spreading myths, glamorization of sexual violence, and victim blaming or shaming. And then you create this society that tolerates the power and control behaviors and disregards women's rights and safety. So, in that perspective, that is what fuels the rape culture. That's what keeps it all going over time. So when you're saying things over here or glamorizing things over here and spreading a myth or two over there, it keeps the pot always stirring, and it keeps it going for everyone in the culture. So that's kind of how they work together. And I did the graphic of all of the circles interlinking because, like I said, it's hard to just pull one piece out. One impacts the other, impacts the other, impacts the other. And that's how we get this whole cultural um, concept rolling. But I also want to go back to what the special note was. We understand it's not just about women. It's when you use degrading language about anyone, when you objectify anyone's body, when you're spreading myths about sexual assault or glamorizing sexual violence as a whole and blaming any victim. All of those pieces start to build into that cultural. And then over time, the women have been focused on because more often than not, sexual assault is happening toward women. But we're not the only group that is happening toward. And other groups that are typically considered groups that are oppressed, when you have all of those issues that we talked about with their being able to be their gender, their race, and what have you, all of those intersect together and creates a bigger issue for them that may be experiencing the sexual violence. So I want to talk about it in terms of everybody, um, degrading anyone, objectifying anyone, victim blaming anyone that may be a victim, and not just a particular people group, because it is about creating a society that tolerates that behavior toward any group of people. So as we progress, I want to keep it in that vein. So let's look at the key elements of that and breaking it out. Language, sexually explicit jokes, catcalls, um, certain phrases, boys will be boys, or why are you being so rigid? Nailed it. Those kind of things are all language that pulled out. Someone say, well, it's an individual statement. But when you get lots of individuals making all of those individual statements, it gets normalized. We get desensitized to it, and it makes it so it's easier for the next thing and the next thing. And that's how we perpetrate, not perpetrate, but perpetuate, perpetuate those things. So I want you to kind of think in those terms. Don't think of pulling out one little piece, but when all of those little pieces are allowed in different levels with different groups at different volumes, it perpetuates a whole culture. Um, Objectification, we would sometimes do in our groups that we do, jail groups, and we talk a lot about objectification of our bodies. It it makes that person get an appearance of being an object, and when you have an appearance of being an object, you tend to treat objects less kind, and um, you be less worried about an object than you are a human. So when we objectify someone, it puts them in this status over here where it makes it that much easier not to care about or not to treat it kindly. So if you look at those two pictures, those are actually ads. These were the tamer ones I could find. There are a number of ads out there that are would kind of make your eyeballs kind of pop out out of your head that objectify people. Um, the one with the belt, they're actually advertising the belt. Who wears a belt on their neck? That's the kind of thing where you're objectifying this person with this belt around their neck, and it serves what purpose? That's not what we buy belts for. And then the one that where the woman's body is a beer bottle. So you're now making this body an object. And that, in some cases, in our minds, makes it easier to devalue the person because we're equating it to an object. Um, and then, of course, sexually equating a person's worth with their body appearance um, makes it that much easier to pull someone into that concept of, oh, this is okay because this person is not worthy of this attention because, but they're worthy of this attention. And it creates that whole culture of thought process, attitudes, and beliefs. And that makes it difficult to make an inroads in stopping some of the rape culture thought processes. And then spreading myths is a part of it as well. And there are so many myths out there that people have about domestic violence, about sexual assault, about any number of things. But when we perpetuate myths, it creates a false sense of security. It creates false thought processes. So you're thinking you're on the right path and you're not on the right path. And those thought processes get shared with somebody else and it expands and you create a culture where things are allowed or tolerated. Some of the bigger ones is that most rapes, real rape, I hate that term, but people use real rape all the time, are committed by strangers. And in actuality, most rapes are committed by someone people know. And it's usually about 85 to 90% of the time, they know the person who is sexually assaulting them, whether it's an intimate partner, an acquaintance, all the way up to family members. So the stranger jumping out from behind the bush does happen. But more often than not, you know the person that may be in that position. They're putting you in the position to be sexually assaulted. They'll say real rape. The person didn't scream, they didn't holler, they didn't fight back. Not taking into account that different people respond to trauma in different ways. They may hit that fight, flight, or freeze, and for them, their trauma response is freeze. They can't fight. Their brain has shut down. So describing a rape in terms of what culturally people say it should look like, um, and that being erroneous, perpetuates the myth of what sexual assault is about, what it looks like, and how it impacts people, which is increasing that rape culture concept that rapes are common, are not common. Um, they happen a lot. Um, we have a lot of times that we don't get all of the reports about rape, but they do happen quite a bit. There's a myth about men can't be sexually assaulted, and they can, and they are sexually assaulted. That men can ward off sexual assault because they're strong. That may not necessarily be the case, and the situation may not allow for that. That it's about lust and sex, but it's about power and control. It's about how can I get control and make someone do what I want them to do, whether they want to do them or not. And sex just tends to be the tool that is used. Um, there are a lot of myths out there about sexual assault. Well, if they weren't wearing that, or if they hadn't been drinking or hadn't gone to that party, um, then they were asking for it because they did that. That's a myth. The fact is, you can wear what clothing you choose to wear. It doesn't mean you're giving consent for sexual activity. So, all of those types of myth help perpetuate that concept of it's okay, tolerating and normalizing sexual behavior that is not appropriate sexual behavior. So, keep in mind when you hear something and you go, well, that may not sound right, check it out, look it up, call us. We'll help direct you in a way that you might can find the information. Just don't assume that what somebody says is the fact, because there may be a definite different fact about that sexual myth that you have been hearing, and you want to be able to tell somebody what the actual truth is. So we're not going to spread any more myths, right? And then glamorization of sexual violence in movies, in sitcoms, and dramas, where you use sexual abuse as that tool to make the storyline more dramatic or more interesting. And that gets used all too often. And you can consider music lyrics. Most popular song most recently is Blurred Lines. And um, those words are words that you can hear survivors saying, that their abusers said to them. that, well, I wasn't sure. I know you want it. I want it, and I know you want it. Um, you're a good girl, but you know you want it. You looked at me this kind of way and set it up so that I would know that you want it. So all of those kind of terms and phrases that some of the survivors that come in and talk to us, that their perpetrator has said to them when they said, "That's not what I wanted." So when you have music that kind of blurs that line, it just makes it easier to tolerate it because you're desensitized to it because you're hearing a song played constantly on the radio saying it's okay to do what you want to do, even if there's blurred lines. And then I'm going to hopefully be able to show you this. Before we talk about victim blaming, I want to show you a little clip. We got permission to use these, and it's important to be able to see this in a different kind of way because it gives you an opportunity to talk about it from a different angle that seems a little less charged. So let me see if I can make it play.
Hey, did you hear?
No, what's up?
James is dead.
What? Oh my god, what happened?
Apparently somebody killed him at a party.
What party? Was he there alone?
At that big party off campus on Friday.
Oh man, wow. That sucks.
Yeah.
Was he drinking at the party?
Huh? I don't know. I guess some. It was a party after all.
Yeah, 'cause alcohol makes it harder to fight off a murderer, and he may have made some bad choices about who to talk to.
Well, everyone was probably drinking some.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what was he wearing, though?
What?
Well, you know how he wears all those V-neck t-shirts?
Yeah, but
I'm just saying, if you don't want to get stabbed in the neck, consider wearing a turtleneck sweater or something.
I don't think that really...
Also, James was super friendly.
Yeah, poor James.
I mean, he was so outgoing.
Yeah, nice guy.
He talked to everyone.
Yeah.
So it's kind of no surprise that he eventually met a murderer.
What?
I'm just saying, if you don't want to get murdered, don't go around talking to strangers at parties and just expect it to be fine. Did he even blow the murder whistle that Student Life gave us?
No, I think it was in his coat. The murder happened so fast.
In his coat. Typical freshman move. I mean, 1 in 5 college students gets murdered. He should have been more careful. No one ever thinks it will happen to them.
I guess. His family must be devastated.
I know. They must be so ashamed that he let himself get murdered like that. It's got to be so embarrassing for them.
What? No, I meant...
So did they find out who did it? I mean, assuming it was a murder and not some assisted suicide thing. Hey, maybe James really wanted this to happen.
No, he definitely didn't. And it was definitely Robert. Some people walked in on the murder, but they didn't think it was any of their business.
Robert? Oh, he's such a nice guy. He's definitely not a murderer.
He is. He definitely did it.
Yeah, well, he just felt like ending James's life, and he did, but he's not like a murderer. Besides, James was such jailbait, you know?
Huh?
I mean, he just had that look that you can totally see wanting to commit a felony and murder him. It's perfectly normal. Poor Robert. Really, it's sad how many young people's lives are ruined just because they kill a few people in college.
Okay, so a little tongue in cheek, yes, um, but hopefully gets the point across that uh, as ridiculous as that conversation was in talking about a murder, some of those same things are said about a sexual assault. Um, and it trivializes what has happened to that person. It blames them for what has happened. It shames them for what has happened when what has happened is a result of someone else's behavior. So when we have those beliefs and attitudes and action that blame the person who has been assaulted, it helps to perpetuate a culture of rape. Um, why were you drunk? Why were you at the party? You didn't scream. Why were you wearing that? Why did you go to that house? If you didn't want to, why did you let me kiss you? If you report it, does it show, do they bring up things that have happened in your past life and say, well, then you did this, then you must have wanted this. All of those reasons that we blame a victim continues that thought process that what happened was not the responsibility of the person who committed the assault. Um, when a victim is assaulted, it is not the victim's fault. It is the behavior of the person that's doing the assaulting that needs to be called into question. And victim blaming can look different ways depending on what setting. So family may say one thing, or it may come across a different way in a court setting. It may come across a different way at a hospital if you're getting your a perk exam done. So it may come in different avenues, and by the end, that victim can feel so blamed and has been shamed so much that they might not ever come forth about anything else. Uh, Someone else who has been assaulted may see that victim being blamed and shamed, and they are not coming out at all to share anything because they don't want that to happen to them. It sets up a whole lot of issues that we then have to deal with culturally, of people not wanting to report, or people taking a long time to report, or people just shutting down because when they report it, they've been blamed and shamed so much. So all of those pieces and parts play a role in creating this whole culture of normalizing and tolerating violent behavior, particularly in the sexual form, as we're talking about today. And so it's not just one thing, it's all those pieces and parts pulled together that increases that opportunity for us to live in that kind of a setting. So, is there anything that can be done? And I encourage you to kind of be thinking of other things as I am mentioning some of these, because there are countless things we can do at all different levels. But these are just some of the things I wanted to kind of prick your mind about and have you think about. And that is, start with avoid using language that objectifies or degrades women or anyone for that matter, any people group. Speak out if you hear somebody else is doing that or they're making an offensive joke. Um, if someone tells you they have been assaulted, take them seriously and believe them. Be supportive to them. Uh, think critically about the media's messages about any group of people, and why are they putting that message out? Is there validity to that message? How is that message impacting other people? How is that impacting people's thought process about how they treat other people? Be respectful of people's space. And right now we're in social distancing, so that kind of helps with that. But even post COVID, be aware of people's physical space and don't take that for granted that you can step into that space. And understand and practice consent. That's a huge piece in stopping the ongoing rape culture beliefs and ideas. And I have another one little clip to show you that's real brief too, that talks about how to view consent, because sometimes our view of consent is not correct. And we want to help people be able to use consent appropriately. So let's see. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Let's see. Oh, there's my ex over here. Okay.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Juanita, I think you're still on mute.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So simple little video that they've created. So you wouldn't force somebody to have tea, so don't force someone to have sex. Consent is everything. Ask. And so having that culture of making sure that we ask about consent is really important, and helping people to learn how to do that, and be expected to do that is the piece we want to work toward, because that helps to make the community safer. Other things we can do. Girls are often taught how to try to protect themselves, while not enough focus is on giving people not to rape, not to sexually assault. Uh, Ask the right questions. Not what were they wearing, ask what made them think that this behavior was acceptable to do. So start challenging how we have conversations about it. Try not to reinforce gender roles, even if they seem harmless. It all builds over time. Do what you're doing today, which is educate yourself about some of the myths and about what rape culture is all about. And if you are so inclined, check out the Project Unbreakable. I do give you a trigger warning for that as well before, if you decide to look it up. It is a very sobering project that shows all the message that sexual assault survivors were told before they were assaulted, in some cases after. And they have written them on these boards, and you see the similarity of some of those messages, and those messages are degrading in some instances. Those messages are based on myths, and some they're glamorizing inappropriate sexual behavior. They're doing all of those things that we have brought out as key elements that perpetuate a rape culture. So if you have the wherewithal to do that, go check that out. It gives you something to think about. And one of the things that we like to do in an educational presentation is to kind of charge you to think about something, charge you to see how that might impact what you do or don't do, how your behavior may change as a result of hearing certain pieces of information that we've shared today. So I just have some questions there, reflective moments. What would you do? In light of what you've heard today, you're at a dinner table and a family makes a sexist or racist or homophobic joke. What would you do? You're at work and you hear a coworker make sexual comments and gestures toward another employee. What will you do now that you know more? You hear a friend telling someone else a myth about sexual assault. What will you do? You're on social media and read comments from people talking about how someone claimed they were raped, but it was probably just to get back at the person. You hear someone saying the victim shouldn't have been drunk. These are simple instances, but remember that social ecological premise that you're an individual and you're in that relationship, and that relationship is in the community, and that community is in the society. So what we make some decisions to do as an individual can definitely impact the whole. Think about what would you do, because what we permit becomes our culture. And that begins with us making some decisions about what we will permit and what we won't, and what type of culture do we want to create. And those are some of those pieces that we can use to help in rape culture. To say that it would change overnight would be unrealistic, but it starts with those little pieces. It starts with education. It starts with having the conversation, which is why it's important that you're here today to learn how to have that conversation with someone else, to be educated enough to know what to say and have that conversation about, to change something that maybe you're doing that may be adding to the pot. But it takes us all working on it to help end a rape culture. And I hope that through something that has been said today, it gives you food for thought in what you can do to help stop the rape culture that exists in our society. And with that note, I'm going to stop sharing and get Leslie to help me. If there's any questions or comments that people have as we wrap up.
Well, while we're waiting, the presentation was fantastic. You did not disappoint. You never disappoint. Thank you so much, Juanita. And we do want to open the floor for questions. So if you have a question for Juanita, please raise your hand and we will get you. If you are not comfortable going on camera or talking, put that in the chat and we will definitely get to your question. I've got the chat pulled up as well. And of course, everybody is praising you on the presentation, Juanita. It was really good. I especially loved the consent video. I feel like we've talked about this before today, but we will be posting those videos online so that people can see them. They're brilliantly simplistic, which is great. So does anybody have any questions about Juanita's presentation? We'll give everybody a few minutes. What would you say? I have a question while we're waiting, Juanita. What would you say is the most important thing as for talking about teens and young adults, college students, if you know someone who is a victim who is talking to you, what would you think the most important thing your role could be in that position?
So if someone is talking to us about the fact that they've had a sexual assault has happened to them?
Or, not really, maybe, I'm not sure. I don't know. I feel like, what is that person searching for? And I get that question a lot. I don't know that he raped me. But that question, what do you feel like the role is of that friend or that confidant that person has decided to share?
Well, listening goes a long way. That's one of the bigger pieces that survivors need. And there may be things that they're having to work out for themselves that you may not be able to fix in that moment. But them being able to talk to someone who's open about it, who's not drawing attention to it in a way that feels like they're being blamed or shamed, or just having that person to listen and believe them
Right.
is crucial. And then if you're not sure how to answer that, say, hey, I'm not sure, but maybe we could talk to somebody who might know the answer. And they may or may not be ready for that, but really just having that person to talk to makes a big difference.
I feel like too, maybe that person is looking for some validation that the way they feel is okay. It's okay to question things, doesn't make you a bad person. But I feel like in that moment, that person may be looking for validation. We do have a question. Says, good information. How do you comfort one that does not want to reveal the rape incident and blame themselves?
That is a lot of survivors who are in that space, and just reiterating to them that the sexual assault, that behavior was done by the person, and that person is at fault for that inappropriate, illegal behavior. It's not their fault as the survivor, it is the fault of the person who is responsible for doing that behavior. And saying that once won't necessarily have it settle and land. Sometimes you're having that conversation over and over. They just have to keep hearing it in order to have it resonate with them. But being a confidant and helping them know it's not your fault. You didn't do what was wrong. The other person who assaulted you is the one who had the behavior that was wrong.
And you say that all the time in your presentations. I said at the beginning, you're a mentor of mine, but you say all the time, I hate the question when we're talking about domestic violence, with the same thing with this. Well, why doesn't she just leave? Or why did she allow this to happen? And you have been on record saying, I hate that question, because the more appropriate question is, why did they do that? Why are they abusing? Why did he rape her? Why did he assault her? So those are, I think, all kind of tie into what rape culture is. And the whole mindset of how we think about that, how we're raising our children, what they're hearing from the time that they're, teeny tiny little things. So, well, good. Well, your presentation was amazing, and I really appreciate you. We at Avalon appreciate everything that you do every day. And I think closing this out would be, when Avalon says we respond, we do. And that our service area is the Middle Peninsula and the Williamsburg and surrounding areas. And if you need someone to talk to, or if you're not sure what you need, the first step would be to get in touch with us and to get in touch with Avalon. You go to our website, avaloncenter.org. You can see all the information there. You can see our helpline. We will get you either counseling. Sometimes we need emergency shelter. That's a whole nother conversation on all of the services that Avalon can offer. But as we are in the smack dab in the middle of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, this is a great topic. This is something that we want to continue to talk about. It's a tough conversation, and but if we don't talk about it, then we have no solutions to change this culture. And you are at the forefront. Thank you so much.
I am glad I could help, and hopefully everybody can take something away from it and be able to share something with someone else, so the conversation doesn't stop.
That's exactly what we had. No is a complete sentence, and we don't want this to stop. So
And we will, hopefully you will take the polling questions that we are going to put up. It is anonymous.
Yes.
We
Thank
just
you
like
for
to
that
get
reminder.
we just like to do evaluations to see what worked, what didn't work, and how we can make things better.
That is perfect. Hang on one second. Mary, are you on top of the polling questions?
It looks like I'm not able to get it. Maybe Terry can on her side.
There we go. So the first question, and I'll go ahead and read it out loud and we can just talk very quickly. This is all anonymous. It really does help us. It helps us be better. And that as an agency, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to be better on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. We want you to respond to the questions. The first one is, how would you rate the overall content and quality of the presentation? And again, this is 1 strongly disagree and 5 strongly agree. The second one is, did this presentation increase your awareness of services Avalon provides as a community resource? Number 3 is, did this presentation increase your knowledge of information that will help you identify and respond to teen dating violence? Did this presentation help you increase knowledge?
Leslie?
Yes.
This particular questions are with the teen dating violence, so this one should actually be for sexual assault.
Right. As we were going through, I realized as we got about halfway through.
So they're pretty much the same questions, just for rape culture or sexual violence versus teen dating violence.
Right. Terry, seeing that?
So they can continue to answer. It's just we will know that the question, I wanted them to know that we know the question is for sexual violence.
Let's see. Yeah, I would say everyone just continue and we will tweak that at the end. The technology is not our way, but that's okay because we all live in a world where we understand that and we are more than tolerant of technology issues because we have all been there. I have a question for you while we are waiting, Juanita.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on. How does it affect victims long-term when they don't report this is a great question, when they don't report sexual assault or are not believed?
So there's multiple layers to that. Are we asking, how does it affect them as far as court or personally?
No, I think this is personal. This is how it's affected you personally if you don't report it and you go on, through your life coping on your own.
Some have been able to do that. Their level of resiliency has helped them, whatever factors in their lives that have supported them have allowed them to do that. They do have some work that they're doing internally to kind of help them process and deal with life. It's not like it's just not affecting them. They have compensated in different ways to be able to kind of move forward. Often, however, though, holding that in can have a detrimental effect because perhaps they don't have the resiliency and the coping skills to deal with it in a way that is healthy for them. So it can manifest itself in different formats of whether they might get addicted to something to help numb the pain, or they may involve themselves in different things that perhaps they wouldn't have normally involved themselves with, because they just don't know what to do with all of that stuff that they're carrying. So it can have a detrimental impact on people. And as we have talked about in our society, has been in the forefront in the last couple of years, it impacts how sometimes people perceive what they're saying as to whether or not they believe them. Or if that's the case, why didn't you come forward before now? And there could be countless reasons as to why someone may not come forward. So it does create that atmosphere that sometimes others don't believe because they didn't come forward. But you have a lot of survivors who don't come forward. They're not sure they're going to be believed. They're not sure who to come forward to. They've been shamed and blamed before, so they're not going to put themselves under that. They don't feel like they're going to be believed. So there are countless reasons why. And that's why we're here, to be able to help people sort through all of that and to deal with some of the impact that that has had on their lives.
Yeah, it's yeah, we've talked about this in length before, when we had our podcast a while back, and we talked about the effects of sexual assault on men. And we kind of dove down that road a little bit on coping mechanisms, and it's a whole nother topic, but I'm sure we will have great topics for everyone. And I think we've got everybody. The polling process is complete.
Great.
All
I'm
right.
glad we had the opportunity, and let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. And again, if you have any issues or if you have any questions, visit us at avalоncenter.org. We have people, the helpline, the number is on our website. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you need anything, please give us a call. We will respond. Thank you, guys.